Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun again from Zoobox, a podcast about nonsense. But today we're going to be talking about John Carpenter's 1981 film Escape from New York. It stars Kurt Russell, Lee Van Cleef, Ernest Borgnine, Donald Pleasance, Isaac Hayes, Harry Dean Stanton, Adrian Barbeau, Tom Atkins, Charles Cyphers, and a host of other just kind of little character actors, little bit parts that kind of fill out the world that this movie takes place in. The plot synopsis, according to IMDb, which is always undersells the movies on here, but in 1997, when the U.S. president crashes into Manhattan, now a giant maximum security prison, a convicted bank robber is sent in to rescue him. You know, that, like, it describes it, but at the same time, it doesn't describe it, which is often a kind of a trend I've noticed on IMDb. The log lines, the little synopsis they give are so totally undersell what the movies are talking about. But anyways, so just a little background on me and Carpenter. I am a huge John Carpenter fan. He's probably in my top 5 directors. My favorite movie of all time. For a myriad of different reasons, both objectively, both because of nostalgia and growing up with it, is John Carpenter's The Thing, and Prince of Darkness is actually pretty high up there. It's gone up in esteem over the years, but we'll talk about that another time. But yeah, so I've always had a thing for John Carpenter. I grew up watching Escape from New York. It is kind of a staple of my childhood, and it's a movie that I'm very familiar with. I saw it a lot as a kid, but I hadn't seen it probably for like a decade at this point. So when I watched it this morning, it was the first time I'd seen it in a long, long while. And how does it hold up? How does it hold up in 2020? It holds up real well, actually. It's a fantastic movie. It's like another one of those nice 90-minute movies. It's the perfect movie length, I think, especially when you're a busy adult. And it just delivers on every aspect. I mean, granted, you got to remember, in 1981 and making genre pictures like this, Carpenter didn't have access to a huge budget. This was kind of the thing that catapulted him into larger success or larger ability to like kind of make bigger budget things. I mean, right after this, he does The Thing for Universal, which famously, if you know, was a giant flop, both critically and financially. It went up against E.T. The summer that E.T. came out, The Thing also came out, and it just got completely trounced. But so this has got a pretty modest budget for the most part. I think it was about probably around $25 million, maybe a little less than that. And it utilizes its budget so well. Like, I don't know what happened between like the 80s low budget movies and the 90s low budget movies, because it seems like they're just operating in a different world. You know, you go and watch a lot of the genre stuff from the 70s and 80s, and they were able to really create some like beautiful, like atmospheric, interesting worlds, and with great set design, and they were just able to utilize locations really, really effectively and like redress them. You know, in the case of Escape from New York, in kind of a dystopian Fallout kind of world where everything's decrepit and falling apart in Manhattan. And it gets around every dollar out of it. It's a complete cohesive experience. And if you know about John Carpenter and his proclivities, John Carpenter is a huge, huge fan of Westerns. He's always talking about Howard Hawks, who wasn't exclusively a Western director, but he directed a lot of Westerns. Howard Hawks actually directed The Thing from Outer Space, which is what Carpenter ended up remaking in The Thing, and also John Ford, The Searchers and whatnot. So that's like his bag. And what he did here was basically make a Western, for lack of a better way to put it. Kurt Russell is doing an impression of Clint Eastwood, kind of the man with no name style Clint Eastwood from the spaghetti westerns. And this has very much that feel of kind of an old Clint Eastwood spaghetti western. It feels like, he's kind of like this really stoic, silent, a man with like a singular purpose, doesn't really have a character arc per se. And he kind of just goes in and experiences the world. and kind of in this case it's kind of like a descent into hell in a certain respect. Like as the movie goes on, it gets darker and more complicated and weirder as you see like what has happened to Manhattan in the years since it became a prison, I don't know, island, whatever you want to call it. And it's super, super engaging. I like it. It's like one of those movies where you think about objectively what its goals are and does it execute on those goals. And 100%, I don't think this movie like misses a beat. If there is a drawback at all, and it was more of a drawback, I guess, in a broader like populist sense, is that like it doesn't have a main character that has growth or a really an arc per se. He does a little bit, but not anything that feels well defined. He's just not that kind of character. And if you're familiar with the things that this is referencing, I don't think you're really going to mind that. It's like a man's man type of character, and he doesn't give a fuck about anything but his own self-preservation. That's the world he comes from. That's the existence he lives in. He's a career criminal, like soldier, and he just does not. He's like a nihilist. He does not give a fuck, and he's just doing this to save his own skin because he has to do. He doesn't have a choice. Doesn't mean he's like a bad guy in situationally. You know, when things come up where he has to be a hero, he acts like a hero. Even if it's reluctantly, he does do that. He's not a completely heartless fuck, but he's a guy that really hates the man. You know, he has no time for government bullshit, and a lot of that's informed by his backstory, which you kind of get a little bit of in the movie. Not a ton, but just a lot of context clues, a lot of the way that he deals with the authority figures that send him on his mission, the little kind of little references they make to a past that you never get to see. And that's one of the things I will say I really, really appreciated about this on this rewatch was the first half hour. The first half hour, Snake is not even in New York yet. It's all about world building. It's all about giving you these little clues into who these characters are, and also, but more importantly, the setting the context for the world you're about to kind of go into. It's got a little bit of like a Dante Alighieri kind of Divine Comedy, Inferno, kind of going down through the circles of hell type of vibe to it. Like I said, as he gets deeper and deeper, the more decadent and the more evil everything gets. And he has to kind of, even as an amoral person at this point in his life, he has to still come up against people that are even more amoral and even more selfish. So it's an interesting kind of dark sci-fi fantasy movie in a weird way. I say fantasy kind of, I guess, maybe not fantasy might not be the right word, but it feels like it has a fantastical element because just things are a little heightened. In the same way that things are kind of heightened in something like, Walter Hill's The Warriors. It would make a good companion piece to the original, this movie, Escape from New York. And I love that they took the time to do that, because it feels like a real movie. It looks like a real movie. Dean Cundey was the director of photography, and he is excellent. This is an early Dean Cundey movie, and he knocks it out of the park. He gives the film such a beautiful texture and such a beautiful life, in this really dark, macabre way. And the movie would not be the same without his influence, 100%. I like Carpenter's a good director, or he was a good director. I didn't really like the last couple of things he did, but Cundey is really the thing I think that sets this apart. Like at the time it was made, like it makes it stand the test of time. Something like this could age poorly, and Escape from New York does not. It does not, and it's all anchored by, Kurt Russell's kind of iconic performance. Even though he is aping Clint Eastwood, and he's never been shy about that. He says that if you've ever seen an interview with him when he talks about Snake Plissken, he was because that's one of his favorite heroes growing up was Clint Eastwood in those spaghetti western movies, and that's what they modeled his performance off of. That's what they modeled the character off of. And like I said, the more familiar you are with those movies, the more you're going to see that in here, because it has the same type of structure almost that a lot of those movies do. Especially if you think of, I think it's A Fistful of Dollars. Probably is the one the most that it feels like it kind of is pulling from. I could be wrong about that. So correct me in the comments if you have a different idea about that. But I watched A Fistful of Dollars like a couple years ago. And then having watched this just this morning, it just really struck me. I was like, oh, wow, this feels a lot like that movie. But in a good way. Not in a way where it feels like it's kind of corny and like ripping it off. It just feels like cut from the same cloth, of the same ilk. And it was awesome. I had such a good time watching this movie today. It's just because, like I said, it had been like a decade, and I was just so into it, so like kind of enthralled by the whole thing, and just the quality of craft on display here is really, really impressive, and it makes me confused about what the fuck happened in the 90s, because as everyone knows, there's a sequel, Escape from LA. I watched that as well, and I'm going to talk about that in my next video. I'm going to do both the movies. But just like in comparison to this, like you're like, what the fuck happened with the production stuff? Because that Escape from LA had a much bigger budget than this did, and it does not achieve half of the mood or atmosphere. You know, I did not check to see if Dean Cundey came back for Escape from LA, because that could be the answer. You know, if you got a director of photography who knows what he's doing, he's gonna make your shit look great. And it's got just a fucking awesome, great, unique look. Like I said, it feels dystopian and hellish and nightmarish and but unique. It doesn't feel like every other dystopian movie you've ever seen. Like, it really does feel like its own thing. And I love the version of Manhattan that they created, and all like filling it with the extras and the little bit parts. Super awesome. And that's, you know, one of the things, you know, Kurt is like I said, Kurt Russell anchors the movie, but everybody around Kurt Russell just strengthens the like the larger picture. I mean, like, you know, you got Lee Van Cleef, famous, you know, Western actor in the 60s and 70s, and he like brings like real gravity to it. Or even somebody like Ernest Borgnine. You know, Ernest Borgnine, McHale from McHale's Navy. The original McHale's Navy is in it as the cab driver, and he's great. And it just adds like a fun life to the movie. And then, of course, you got Harry Dean Stanton, who is just an awesome character actor, one of my favorites. And he's great in this movie. They just add like a gravity to everything, and it makes it all click, makes it all work, especially considering the fact that that Carpenter is referencing these older movies, and he's brought into this movie some of these older actors, these older character actors. So it makes it even feel more of a piece of those things. And it fits really well in with that world, even though it's the science fiction version. Like, it really is like kind of a old-fashioned Western. Isaac Hayes as the Duke. Isaac Hayes is great in this movie. It's probably the best acting thing he's ever done, by far. Like, I'm struggling to think of something else that Isaac Hayes was really great in. And this is just perfect. Just the modulation, or the casting is perfect. You want somebody like Isaac Hayes to be the Duke, you know, driving around in his Cadillac with chandeliers on it. That's, you know, and that's another thing, to just go back to the production design, the set design. Everything is so cool and unique. It utilizes, you know, contemporary stuff from the 80s, the kind of cars and whatnot, even though it takes place in 1997. But they just have fun with it, and it gives it's just this really unique, idiosyncratic, like, vibe. It just feels of itself. And yeah, all credit to the team that put that together. All credit to Carpenter for deciding to build that out, because it's a very simple story. It's very straightforward. It's not very complex at all. It really isn't. It's really more about the journey than the story itself. But because of this eclectic cast of characters, and because of Kurt Russell, you're just kind of engaged the whole way through. It doesn't ever stop being interesting. It's not something that's trying to throw twist after twist after twist, or interesting plot element, or no, it's pretty straightforward. While there are some twists and some surprises along the way, it definitely has this kind of classical anti-hero's journey kind of feeling about it. And it has aged really well. It holds up super well. So I'd be curious to show this to somebody that has never seen it before or that didn't grow up with it. I'd be really curious to see what somebody like that would think of this movie. Like, I think it's awesome. And I really objectively think it's awesome. I don't think it's just nostalgia that's informing this feeling or this opinion, but I mean, I got warm, fuzzy feelings while watching it. I have so many memories of watching this as a kid with my dad, like on cable, and at some point we had the DVD. We used to watch it all the time and listen to the audio commentary. Pro tip, if you get a Carpenter Kurt Russell movie, often, I think almost all of them except for maybe Escape from LA, have a commentary track with the two of them, and they are some of the most entertaining commentary tracks of all time. They're informative but funny, and it's cool. Just they're clearly good friends and just like hanging out and talking about these movies they made. It's a way better than when Carpenter ends up with somebody else, because Carpenter is like I love him in interviews. I think he's a very fascinating, very smart, very sharp dude. But his commentaries can be a little dry. Like I was really excited to listen to his commentary for In the Mouth of Madness, which is another one of my favorite movies. And it was kind of boring. I was really disappointed. And I hate to say that because I'm such a fan of Carpenter. I'm so pro Carpenter. And I hope he comes back and at least gives us one more time. One more movie, John. But yeah, so it's just a seminal movie for me. It's kind of a quote unquote important movie to me, because a lot of these movies I got my love for or was introduced by was my father, and my father has passed away about 10 years ago now, and they can sometimes act as kind of a portal back to those moments or those feelings, like all good art that has affected you when you're younger. That's what they are. They're these little time capsule portals that just take you right back to a feeling. So like I said, I don't think that colors my perception of this movie too much, but it's definitely a factor because this is a 5 out of 5 movie for me. It's like I said, it's almost perfect to me. I really can't think of anything that I really would criticize other than the fact that there is really no character arcs. The characters are kind of just who they are, and you just kind of experience the world with them. But because of the interesting cast, like I said, and you're constantly meeting new people, it's always kind of escalating things through the characters, through the types of characters that Snake meets on his journey. It just keeps you invested. It's awesome. It's fucking great. A super well-constructed movie. Like I said, it's got that perfect 90... Well, it says 98 minutes, but I think if you cut out the credits, it's really like 90 minutes. And it's awesome. You should watch it. Everybody should watch Escape from New York, especially if you've never seen it. It's actually streaming on Amazon Prime right now, or Shudder if you have Shudder. And also on Amazon Prime, it just got put back up, was Escape from LA is also on there. And that is going to be my next video. So look out for that tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about Escape from LA because I have a lot of thoughts. Some very surprising ones. You might be surprised at what I have to say about Escape from LA. Well, maybe not. I don't know. But we'll see. Escape from LA was not a movie I really grew up with. So yeah, I definitely have more of an objective view of that movie. But yeah, that's going to do it for me today. If you want to become more invested in the ZooBox experience, head on over to Facebook and look up ZooBox Podcast. All the links for these are all in the description as well. We're on Instagram at ZooBox Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Shaun ZooBox. And yeah, that's going to do it for me today. And also, if you have any recommendations for the future during these daily videos, if you'd like to hear me talk about something, it doesn't necessarily have to be a movie. It could be a book. It could be a band. It could be whatever. I'm down for content. This is for content. The content gods, more. They need it. Got to feed the algorithm. And also, it's really fun. I just enjoy talking about movies, even if I have to talk to myself. I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? Because sometimes, that's just the way it goes. Sometimes you just can't find people with as much quote-unquote free time. I do these when my son's taking a nap. So it's just when I feel like I should take a nap myself, I say, nah. And I record talking about some of my favorite movies ever. And also random movies I watch. So there you go. All right, everybody. You have a wonderful day, a beautiful night, and a fantastic tomorrow. Or something, or whatever.